Okay, I have 7 o'clock. I'd like to bring the February 11th, 2025 Planning Board meeting to order. Karen?
Claudia Volkin.
Here.
Jim Callahan.
Here.
Kevin Donovan.
Here.
David Edmonds.
Here.
Rob Klein.
Here.
Alan Turner. Here. Chair Bob Doherty.
Here. Before the meeting begins, please silence your cell phones and note that this meeting is being recorded. We're going to skip a little bit right now, and the first item that we're going to discuss is the subdivision, the Marcy Street definitive subdivision. Speak.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Michael Avaney. I am an architect with Cummings Properties, representing the owner of the project. I'll try to keep this very brief. We have been here before. I think we're all familiar with the project. We have finally put together all the documents to satisfy the conversation we had here last September, how the piece of Marcy Street is going to be protected and how Lot 2 is going to be donated. And we're basically here to ask this board to sign off on the draft amendment letter and endorse the plans.
Any questions from the planning board? Seeing none, Mr. Director?
Yes, I'll make it short and sweet also. Attorney Salvati did sign off on all the documents associated with this plan and the amended decision of the planning board, together with the declaration of covenant for the abutters of this property to end up signing. So tonight, for the board's consideration, we do have the definitive plan for the board's signature, and that's ready to sign. And the declaration is included in the packet for this evening. And again, that's been signed off on by Attorney Salvati. And we also have a handout that includes the mayor's signature and the city council's action on this matter that's already taken place. So my recommendation is for the board to sign the plan this evening. And if you have any questions on the amended decision, I'll be able to answer those for you.
Are there any questions?
Through the chair, to
Yes.
John, do we need a vote, or do we just need to sign it?
Don't need a vote because we already voted on the decision itself.
Beautiful.
So, and the plans have been ready for signature. So
Excellent.
after the meeting adjourns, we can sign the plan and have it recorded.
Wonderful. Well, I myself would be delighted to be the first one to sign this Marcy Street plan after all we've all been through. So, thank you.
Appreciate that.
You're all set?
All right, I want to thank the board and the planning department for all the effort that we have collectively put into this, and it's been a while, but we're that close. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll go back under public hearings. Public hearing, zoning map and text amendment. This is continued from our last meeting. And I don't know if we need to read the whole thing, but
No, we wouldn't have to.
read the
because
whole thing.
We
'cause
did
did
that.
last time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is continuation of last month's meeting.
All right, good evening. For the record, Attorney Joseph Tabby, Woburn and Rudman, 500 Unicorn Park Drive in Woburn. This evening, we're going to make a short presentation where we are in terms of other meetings. We were before the City Council Ordinance Committee last evening. The matter has remained in committee pending a recommendation from this board. We have a public hearing, continued public hearing before the City Council next Tuesday. So this evening, what we're going to do, I'm going to introduce Peter Carbone, who is going to take you through elevation plans, I believe, at the first public hearing, You wanted to see proposed elevation plans of what the buildings would look like. There also were some questions regarding traffic. When Peter is finished, Scott Thornton from Vanassa and Associates will provide you with a overview of the traffic expected from this proposal, along with some of the proposed intersection improvements that would be part of a proposal if the amendment is adopted and we proceed with the special permit. So with that, I'll introduce Peter Carbone.
Hi, everyone. For the record, Peter Carbone. Good to see you all again. We actually ran through the slide presentation last night at the subcommittee meeting that John did, but John got detained for a little while, so he asked me to step in. So I'm going to do my best to go through what was his presentation last night and kind of show you some of the pretty pictures of what we've been developed. So just to kind of reorient you, I think we showed this at the meeting a couple of weeks ago. Again, the four townhouse buildings in the front, those house about 32 units. The two buildings in the back, Building A and Building B, the 5-story buildings, they house about 93 units in the Building B and 99 units in Building A. You've all seen this, so I don't need to spend too much time on this. We're glad to come back to it, but sort of get to the heart of the renderings. So we were asked by several members, I think, of the council, maybe some of you all at our meeting, to show what would this look like, the view from Main Street. Looking in, I think we showed some elevations of what the townhouses would look like at the last meeting, but not the buildings in the rear. So this would be basically the view from the new entranceway. The new entranceway, if you picture, would go right through where the fire station is today. That first building on the right is the first of the 4 townhouse buildings, and that, in essence, is where the driveway location is today. So everything would get shifted over. People had been asking whether or not you'll be able to pick up on the existing Guastavino building with the new layout, and this is what you would see from the street. So, and as we'll get a little closer, you can see that architecturally, and again, the elevations here, the street sits about 10 feet higher than the site, than this portion of the site, and it sits about another 10 feet lower as we go further away from the main street, so it's kind of diving down. So within the building on the left, there is a row of parking or a level of parking beneath that building that you can't see, and you won't see from 3/4 of the building. From that standpoint, the lower level is fitted out with what would likely be our entranceway. Could be an activity area, could be leasing office, could be exercise gyms, whatever those might be, something more lively that would be there on the first floor. You can see from the wood tones that we carried out, the lighter colors, the wood tones, if you will, that are going more vertically, are done to pick up some of the wood pines, the southern yellow pines and whatnot that are on the existing building, back on the Tati building, and trying to play off of the color schemes with some of the other colors on that building and so forth. So this building, the 2 buildings are clearly, the materials play off of each other nicely. The base is grounded in some sort of stone material, be it some sort of cultured stone, brick, something along those lines. And then you've got more of a cementatious material as you go up in the whites and the grays. The upper panel, not sure if that would be metal panel or what exactly that material may be yet, but a different architectural material. And then again, the wood tones, the lighter beiges and the yellowish more colors that you see up underneath the roof are done to play off of the architecture from the existing building. So this is by no means a final design, but this is where we're headed. I think it plays off extremely well with the existing architecture that's there. You can see it's a little bit of a different angle for the building closer to the street. You can see that we've moved some of the roof lines in on the top floor, in on basically 3 of the 4 ends, I think maybe even all 4, where just to try to lower the elevation a bit or soften the edges by bringing them in with the outdoor areas and some of the balconies and stoops that you see in these pictures. The building is a 5-story building. The elevation, as you go from right to left, clearly slopes down Again, the landscape here, again, by no means is it finalized, but you'll have a series of stone walls to pick up on some of the stone-type architecture that is on the existing building that we would use for some of the areas for signage. And then you can see a little bit of the townhouses in the front and the style and quality of what's there. Those are showing metal panel on the roofs, depending on overall feasibility. That's the plan, is to keep with the metal panel there. This is the image today of the site or in the surrounding area. I think everybody is probably pretty familiar with this site, with this photo or this image. This is basically it's superimposed in of how the project would look once it's done. Again, by no means is this a final rendering. We are still working on around the edges on a lot of this, and clearly we have to go site plan review, site plan special permit review, if the city is so inclined to allow the rezoning. But this is, in essence, what the project would look like. Again, you have the 4 townhouse buildings out towards the front. Most of the buildings along the front today are right up on the sidewalk. There's virtually no setbacks for most of the houses, and there are some driveways out in the front. So this, in essence, creates a 10-foot area of green space between the newer sidewalks and the proposed fronts of the buildings. And you can see the new walkway, or down by the expanded green, where Lowell Street cuts through. And I'm kind of walking through some of the things we talked about a couple of weeks ago. So if I do, by all means, we can come back to any of this. I just don't want to ramble on too long. If you all are going to have, I'm sure we'll have some questions. We have had some recent conversations with some of the representatives of the Boys Club. I know Julie Gage is here from the club. They're very preliminary. Well, they're preliminary, but not preliminary. We've been talking to them for years, but some of the conversations are around, do they really want to use the rotary, or do they want to use the existing entranceway? And the thought where we seem to be headed, and Julie is certainly willing or capable in here for the club, to likely keep the existing entranceway as it is, with the possible tie-in of the rotary down in the future if it is warranted, which is fine with us. The operation today works pretty well. It's a new driveway that was built, as I'm sure you all know, back about 5-6 years ago. Maybe there's some improvements with sidewalks or different things, crossing for the kids to get across. The kids will have a much better way to get across for those that are coming from the Kennedy every day to get across at this intersection and then come down. We're also going to be upgrading some of the bikes, where the bike path will eventually be going along the canal. I think John and his team are looking into now even cleaning it out now, maybe putting some crusher run down or something, so that if anybody's walked that area, it is walkable now, but it could use a little bit of an upgrade, so that the kids, as they come down from the new Harold Wyman, would just cut across the back of the property, and then we would help with the club with a new walkway in to get in through the back. So we're not in any way looking to lessen the pedestrian improvements that we want to make through the site, but we want to even make them a little bit better for the kids as they traverse the neighborhood, especially during construction. We're going to want them to go around the back. So that's in essence what this will, what the new plan will look like. I'll show you a few. These were a result of some questions that came up at the council meeting, but I'm sure you all probably asked us a few of these questions a couple of weeks ago as well. The top one is clearly the existing conditions, the heights of the existing buildings and the fire station. If you look at the ones on the left, you're roughly 30 feet to the peak. The way the buildings are today, the proposed buildings to the top of the 3rd floor is about 35 feet. There's about another 4 feet to the top of the peak here. So these buildings are about 8 to 9 feet higher than the existing buildings as they sit today. Again, they'll be set a little bit further back from the street, which will shield the buildings even behind it, even more, and then landscaped in between. But we wanted to provide an accurate representation of what the street would look like in terms of its scale and so forth. There's another one here. This would be a section through, if you cut through Main Street, kind of reading right to left. If you look at where the Wyman School is, I kind of look at the top elevations, the sea level elevations here at 173, which is basically the top of the Wyman. And then as you come down, the 665 Main Street it's about an 8 to 12 unit brick apartment building that sits next to Jack's up behind the brick wall, the stone wall. That sits up at about 150. And then you have our building as it comes across. We don't have the finished floor elevations on those, but it's lower by probably 5 or 6 feet or so, the building, our particular building, the first townhouses. And then, I'm sorry, it is on the one on the bottom. Sorry, I was still looking at the one on the top. The 153 is about 3 feet above the one on the right. And then you've got building B, which is at the 165 elevation, about 58 feet from the ground up. So we wanted to be candid about what these look like in relation to the street as you drive by. And again, happy to take any questions, on any of this and kind of going through it a little bit quickly. Again, this was a slide that was a little bit of a leftover from our prior presentation, which shows the dotted line through the green area here is where Lowell Street would be converted over into a park to expand it. I think it goes from like 10,000, 15,000 to 25 or 30,000 square feet, in total, which will be much better pedestrian connections to get around the entire area. It'll upgrade it significantly aesthetically and so forth. And Scott Thornton is here, who I'm going to have to talk about some traffic in a second. So I'm going to go back to this. So maybe Scott, I think what we'd like to do is, traffic is the other major component of every project, clearly. Scott Thornton from Vanessa is here tonight, was able to make it. So he's going to go through a few of these slides just quickly for you, and then maybe give you a brief presentation on some of the traffic components of the project. And then once he's done, throw it back to you all for any questions, any fault that you might have on any of this that you've seen today or any traffic or anything else. So thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Scott Thornton with Vanessa and Associates. We conducted a traffic study for the project. As Peter mentioned, I'll just discuss a few slides and then give you an overview of what we found with the traffic study. So that study was scoped out with Jay Corey. He gave us a list of 8 intersections to look at. In addition to, we went from Middlesex Canal, Park Drive down to Mishawam and out to Wynn Street and focused on intersections adjacent to the project. And Peter had mentioned some of the changes that are going on with this slide and proposed configurations for the intersection and the expansion of Wyman Green. I think it's really important to note that by removing that segment of Lowell Street where it comes out between Wilcox Circle and Main Street, that and the removal of some of the existing homes that are there as part of the project eliminates, I think, 10 curb cuts out in that pedestrians would have to go across. And it also eliminates the Lowell Street pedestrian connection where if you're on Main Street headed southbound on that sidewalk, you've got anywhere between something like 28 feet to 150 feet or 135 feet of pavement that you have to cross that's unprotected. So by closing that up and expanding the park space, it's a huge benefit for pedestrians that are, excuse me, that are in the neighborhood, residents in the area. But to do that, we have to make some modifications to Wilcox Circle. And what this plan shows, it's the same intersection, just a little, just rotated 90 degrees. And some of the things that we're looking at this intersection, since we're removing the connection of Lowell Street with Main Street, we have to replace that with a right turn lane on Wilcox Circle. So we're expanding to create a longer section of storage lane for the right turn movement. And then we're also looking at, you can see the sidewalk that's just to the south, crossing Lowell Street, or what used to be Lowell Street. We've looked at options that include creating a few parking spaces in that area where that sidewalk would actually be kind of carved or pushed over a little bit to the west to create some parallel parking spaces there. I know on the south side, north of there on Main Street, it's posted for 1 hour parking across from Jack's. We've also looked at potentially potentially striping out some parking spaces on the southbound side. And the travel lane there on the southbound side is 23 feet wide, so that would accommodate a few parking spaces in addition to the parking spaces that are striped on the northbound side. So one of the things that we looked at, Mr. Tachi focused our attention on the intersection and potential modifications to Eaton Avenue. Currently, that intersection operates in a split phase arrangement where Main Street has the green, and then Wilcox Circle has the green, and then Eaton Avenue has the green. So because of the offset nature of the two side streets, they can't run concurrently. If, however, and so what that does is it's not an efficient design. It causes queues to build up, and that leads to congestion that expands out and leads to driver frustration. If we're able to combine those phases, that intersection is going to operate better. It's going to operate more efficiently. In addition to that relocation, I think it was mentioned at one of the meetings, I think somebody from the public noted if we could add a short green phase to the southbound side of Main Street north of that intersection to allow the left turns to clear out a little bit, that would help the operations there. We actually went a little bit further than that and then striped Main Street to create a short left turn lane for that movement. So with those changes, we're able to show improvements in the operation for this intersection. At the intersection of Main Street and Clinton Street and the relocated Wyman Place site driveway, again, this is similar to the plan you've seen previously. Mr. Tachi had purchased the former fire station, the number 3 station, and what that does is permits the ability to relocate the access to the site directly opposite Clinton Street, which is also operating in that inefficient offset nature with a split phase arrangement by providing a driveway directly opposite Clinton Street. We're able to combine those signal phases and really get rid of a lot of the driver confusion that exists there with the stop bars that are located pretty far from any side street where they have to stop, and this is an improvement over the existing condition. We're showing right now, this is how the connection between the site and the Boys and Girls Club out to Charles Gardner Lane could show or could work. It's more of a placeholder now than it is really something that's part of the project, but it could be incorporated if there's a huge desire for it. In terms of the study itself, we developed a standard study, looked at trip generation, looked at future conditions, and in general, out on Main Street, adjacent to this location, traffic increases during the peak hours are 3 to 4%. north of Clinton Street and 2 to 3% south of Clinton Street. And that's after allowing for the removal of some of the existing residences that are along Lowell Street. But in general, with these improvements that have been identified, both of these signalized intersections would operate in an improved manner compared to the existing conditions. So that's a brief summary of traffic. If you have any questions on that or on any of the other materials, we'll be here to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, do I have any questions in regards to the traffic or anything else that was just presented? Jim?
I'll start by saying the presentation was very nice, but we're here to look at an overlay district rezoning. We're not looking to see what size the buildings are in relationship to other buildings in Central Square. Wilcox Circle is not part of this proposal, nor are all the houses along Lowell Street / Wilcox Circle. I'd like to see that clearly identified. I'd like to see where the landowners are that were still, had not accepted the proposal of this overlay district and weighed in whether they want to be in favor or opposed to it. And that's all we should be doing. We're looking at traffic studies where I listened to a traffic engineer saying he's gonna give you 5 spots at Central Square, which backs up beyond Hart Street, can't even think of the name of the street, but, grew up in the neighborhood. You know, it's a quarter mile deep some nights, and you're gonna give them 4 spots there. I think this concept also is large in scale, and there are other proposed developments that are being considered that are not being incorporated here. Should certainly weigh in people's decision-making. I don't hear anything about the traffic study or the number of trips that have or potentially could take place in the Boys Club. Keep in mind, they used to have bingo there, some 500 people there a night. The height of the building, I believe, was 6 stories proposed. You're showing 5 now on the lot. And nowhere do you depict the houses along Hart Street, right? Hart Street, the houses, I would imagine, are the same height as Gustavino's. And as you can see here in this rendering, Gustavino's is dwarfed by that 5-story. The top of that roof line is the floor line of the 3rd floor. Top 3 floors are above it. I don't see where that fits into the neighborhood whatsoever. I think the cart is way in front of the horse here. I think some of these meetings are getting too far down the line and needs to be reeled in.
David?
So, I noticed that in the change that the only solar will be rooftop. What will it look like on these buildings? How much higher will the building be?
You're talking about the townhouses?
Wherever, all the solar.
No, the solar's only gonna be on the buildings in the back, not on the buildings along Main Street. Is that correct, John? Yeah.
So flat roofs, flat solar? Or what will the solar, is it gonna be, or is it gonna be
No.
flat?
I assume they're gonna be flat, right, John?
Right now, the only solar is on the Gustavino building.
And you probably don't even notice that on Gustavino, it was so well done.
All right, the other thing is traffic. If you could go back to the picture on the traffic setup.
Yep, Scott?
This one?
No, the one where you're, all right, that'll do it. So now we come down, look at that right-hand turn onto Main Street. You really think a truck can maneuver that?
So there may be some tweaks to this. we did design it for, typically designed for a school bus to get around there. There may need to be some tweaks to that corner radius.
I think it's more than it may be some need for some tweaks. That doesn't work. I do traffic, so I know.
Okay.
That doesn't work.
Okay.
And I know that's, people say, well, it's the little detail, we can tweak that later on. I agree with Jim that there's a whole lot of stuff that we need to be thinking about, and, I'm hearing, we'll take care of that later, we'll tweak this, I don't think that works. I like the idea of the park being bigger, I think that's great. It's also a benefit to the sale of, when you're renting the property, you get to look out at a park, that's always a nice sale thing.
Yep.
All right, I'm good for now.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Jim?
In regards to the illustration that's up on the board, the entire Wilcox Circle area, the roadway, and the intersection, is that part of the overlay district, yes or no?
No, it's not.
Excuse me,
Goes
then why is
along-
it being
well, goes
depicted?
along Lowell Street.
You explain to me why it's being depicted then, that work is gonna be performed as part of this overlay, if you're not doing the work, or it's not within the zone.
Well, that's something that's gonna be addressed during the special permit process.
Well, then it could be brought up at that time. You're presenting something and giving the impression to residents and members of the board that this is actually taking place. It came up in the
Oh,
last meeting.
it's not gonna take place until till number one, the zoning amendment gets approved, and number two, the city council grants a special permit.
Right.
So it's not accurate to say that we're saying this is taking place. It won't take place until the proper approvals are granted.
Is there any information regarding the height of the houses on Hart Street in relationship to Gustavino's or the new proposed five-story building that they put up there? Keep in mind, there's one story more allowed in the text of this zoning ordinance. What's the elevation of roof lines at Hart Street in relationship to Gustavino roof line?
We haven't looked at that. That's,
Because currently, there's no buffer between the two properties, right? You're gonna have the bike path, possibly, or the walk path that's currently there, and you have the canal, there's no buffer. So you can-
well, as part of the special permit process, buffers will be discussed with the city council. This is only a proposed zoning amendment. Okay, and we've gone beyond, as a matter of fact, the city council complimented us last night. The chair of the ordinance committee said, look, this is only a zoning amendment that's before us, but we appreciate the extra effort you guys have made to tell us the project that you're gonna propose if the zoning amendment is adopted. So, buffers along, buffering the properties along Hart Street, along the canal, of course, we're gonna install some kind of buffer. What's that?
Nick can address the.
You want to mention them?
Sure, yeah, good idea.
For the record, Nick Delacava with Allen & Major Associates, the site civils for the project. We did look at the existing setbacks from the Guastavino building to the nearest residence. It's approximately 200 feet building to building, and about 140 feet from the corner of the Guastavino building to the residence property line across the canal. And there is an existing heavy buffer through there of thick vegetation and trees.
So you're telling me there's a heavy tree line along the canal on both sides or one side?
You can see it in the aerial too here. And we did walk that whole canal as part of a preliminary drainage study. And I can tell you, it's thick back there.
Second,
Yes.
for the moment.
For the time being.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, I just would like to point out one other thing. So there's 13 parcels of land within this proposed overlay district. There were 13 abutters lists notifying every property owner within 300 feet of each one of those properties. And we've had these many people at city council meetings and these many people at planning board meetings. So I just want to note that for the record.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board members at this moment? Yeah, Jim?
I don't think I heard an applicant reply of the two open parcels that were not under the ownership of Mr. Tachi. Have they weighed in?
I'm sorry?
I'm just asking for an answer, Joe. You put a presentation on, I'm rebutting it, I'm looking for it. You seem to be taking offense to it.
No, I'm not taking offense. I'm just making sure there's accurate statements being made.
As of last meeting, there are two properties that were not under your control, the applicant's control.
Yeah.
Do we have a status if they're for or against this proposal?
They were given public notice, and they have an opportunity to come down here and state whether they're in favor or opposed, or they can choose to sit at home.
Because the reason why I ask that is because we've done other overlay districts in the city.
Mhm.
One affected me personally, and didn't weigh in on it at all. But it does affect me from doing any development on my property, and that's why I ask it. And
No, there's language in the overlay that says if you're part of the overlay, the overlay does not impact the underlying zoning district. So if one of those property owners decides they don't want to participate in the overlay, it does not impact their property whatsoever. They can do whatever they can do right now under the current zoning. So it does not impact what they can do.
I have a question for the director. If those two particular units are particular pieces of land that don't want to go with this overlay district, doesn't this change the whole scope of the overlay district itself? Like, numbers have to be changed and...
Yeah, the map would have to be
The
amended.
map would have to be
The list
changed,
of
right.
properties included would have to be amended,
Okay.
so.
And I would think that would also change what this looks like.
Yeah, it would, I don't think it would change the map if you adopt the map, but I think it definitely would impact density if you're using the total square footage of all the properties.
Wouldn't it prohibit you from building something like one of these front units if two of the houses don't want to go with this? Or
Well, it would have to be probably redesigned, yes, along the front,
mess things up a little bit?
yeah.
Change the spacing of the townhouse units.
Yeah, with two houses in between. Carolyn?
And which two units were they? Which two houses were they? Again, that we don't
I don't know.
participate in.
You know what?
It's, did we buy number 10, it's number 8? 12. There's one house, and we have talked to them, and they're not, see if I can do this right. So there's one house right here, and there's one house right in here, in this gap. And they're both planning to move, and we've made offers to them, and we're waiting and being patient for them. One is an elderly gentleman, right here. We began, who's right next to number 10, who, that gentleman died recently in the last 3 or 4 months, and then we negotiated with his estate. And the other gentleman is about the same age. Next door to him, is that Jimmy Carter? His name is Jimmy Carter, yeah, Jimmy Carter. And he's planning to move, but we're being patient with him, you know.
we've got a little time, and we're just gonna be patient.
So I have another question too, because I get a little confused with this. So if those guys, people want to move or don't want to move, that's kind of your problem. But when we're amending the zoning map for this to create this overlay district zoning, does it include these two houses?
Right now it does.
Right now it does. So am I wrong in saying that this whole thing is kind of moot right now? Because what we're gonna, what we might approve and send to the city council doesn't even exist.
Right, but the underlying zoning district still exists. You know, that doesn't get disturbed. This is an overlay district that's being proposed. It's not a situation where all the property owners within the district have to agree. They're not going to lose any of their rights that they have right now, because the primary zoning district for this area is the existing underlying. And it's either S1, when you get closer to down Lowell Road, it does turn into R2 down that way, but all along Main Street, it's S1. That's the primary. In this
Okay.
overlay district, they're proposing it for properties they don't control,
Correct.
but those property owners are not losing any rights that they have today with us.
I understand that, but again, and anybody here can correct me if they think, but what I'm looking at here is that a proposal that is in front of us to create an overlay district with all these properties in the overlay district doesn't really exist at this moment. Well, if we approve it,
You're
it's
looking,
not.
yeah, but you're looking at the project.
I'm looking at the overall
As Jim
scope
pointed
of
out earlier.
the district. I'm not even looking at the project.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the overall scope of the district.
Right.
Of this overlay district, which these properties are probably listed in here. And we would take a vote to approve this. So that would be like somebody coming to me and saying, hey, your house just got put in an overlay district and it was approved by the planning board and the city council, even though you don't want anything to do with it.
Right, but your property right now could be in an R1 zoning district, and the city decides through a bunch of petitioners that they want to be in an R2 zoning district.
But that
or, you know,
would,
You'd be subject to the city's action.
Yeah,
okay,
Mr. Chairman,
okay, yes.
just came to my mind about a year or so ago, I represented the Little family, Little. They own property on Arlington, on Lake Ave. And their property, along with probably 20 or 30 properties maybe, had been rezoned to R1 back a number of years ago. We petitioned the city council and the planning board to rezone the property R2. Okay, of all the properties there were two property owners, and I believe at least one of them spoke at the public hearing that they didn't support the petition. However, the zoning map was amended to include their properties. So in this particular case, I know exactly, where you're coming from.
But I think John explained,
Yeah.
I understand what he's saying now.
Yeah,
That
okay.
That even though, like in that particular case, even though it was turned over to an R2, the people that had single-family houses didn't have to do anything about it. They weren't affected by it at all.
Correct.
And these people in this particular zoning that we might do would not be affected by this one way or another. They can keep what they have,
Yeah,
they can keep their house. Then it would be up to you guys to have to develop something differently than what you're showing up here to
Yep.
fit their houses.
Yep.
Okay, I hope I haven't confused anybody. Any other questions from the board at this moment? Jim?
Traffic study. Can you have your traffic engineer give us a list of the intersections that Mr. Corey told you to evaluate? Start with, whichever side you like.
So, starting with the intersection of Main Street and Middlesex Canal Park Drive and the fire station driveway. Coming down Main Street at Lowell Street, Main Street at Charles Gardner Lane, Main Street at Mishawam Road, Wyman Street at Lowell Street, Wynn Street at Wyman Street, Main Street at Clinton Street and Wyman Place, and the Woburn Fire Station number 3 driveway, and Main Street at Wilcox Circle and Eaton Ave.
There's no mention of anything coming on Hart Street or, I think I'm drawing the Banfilo building on the corner where Winchester Bank is. Because they all affected, it's a cut through, people come from Bedford Road across, and traveling down Hart Street to do a cut through. And if they don't go down Hart Street, they come down Main. So if you're not evaluating those intersections, you're not getting the true identity of what's going on. And what was going on the east side of Main Street. I didn't catch all those streets.
So Main Street, we went, so we've got Eaton Ave, and then we've got Clinton Street, and then we've got Mishawam Road. So
That's it?
these were the, yeah, I mean, in terms of scoping, typically we look at locations where we have a 50-trip increase during the peak hours, and we don't really have that anywhere except at the front door. So, you know, we went out, it's a pretty big study area, but we understand that there's going to be a lot of focus and a lot of attention on this development. So, you know, I think the traffic study area is pretty comprehensive.
And these intersections given you by the city engineer, correct?
Yeah.
And you think that, was that a quarter of a mile max, probably less than that, from the fire station where Clinton Street is to Mishawam Road? Probably right around a quarter of a mile, maybe less.
Thereabouts, yeah.
Probably less. Right, and nothing comes across town, cuts through the center. We all live in the city of Woburn, we're quite familiar with the cut-throughs.
Yeah,
I think, honestly, the traffic studies need to be more expansive. We've run into this in past developments, not necessarily this one. And everyone that lives along Wyman Street, that corridor, Hart Street, and all those major roadways can guarantee you the backups on a nightly basis.
Yeah, I think that's fair. These are the locations that were recommended for study. You know, at these locations, you know, once we get beyond Wilcox Circle and past Clinton Street, we don't have a huge delay increase due to the project. So, you know, if it's about 80 to 85 peak hour trips in the morning or the evening, right away, that's entering and exiting. So now you're looking at about 40 trips entering, 40 exiting. Now you split them out so that about half of them are headed north, about half of them are headed south or east. So now you're down to 20 trips. So then once you get to Lowell Street and out to Wynn Street, Wyman Street, they start splitting off and dispersing even more, so that by the time you get to some of these other locations, you're looking at a handful of trips. That is probably, you know, not a lot of impact to what's already there.
All set? Okay. And I would like to just reiterate, is that Attorney Tobby did bring up a point, is that really we're really only here for the zoning change, of creating the zone. And we do appreciate the fact that you show us everything that you think you might put up there and stuff, but it does kind of, it confuses things sometimes.
I know.
And so that we get to the point where we think we're voting on that whole unit and stuff going up when it's really not what we're voting on.
Yep.
So we should really take a close look at what's here in terms of what is gonna be involved in this overlay district, and whether we like what's in it, what's allowed, what's not allowed. I mean, looking at this, not much is allowed. Almost everything is a special permit, but if you have any more questions for Attorney Tobby, I think I'd like to turn this over to the public. And hope that John hasn't quit. Didn't quit, did he? Okay. I hope he didn't. We do kinda need him. All right, so this is a public hearing. So at this point, if anybody in the public would like to come up and speak, either in favor or against, or either way, please come up and state your name and address, and at some point, there's a sheet of paper up there which we'd appreciate you putting down your name and address also. So, it's open.
How we doing? I'm Bob Zwicker. I live across the street at 663 Main Street. I've been there 24 years, my wife and my 3 kids. Very familiar to the area. I work from home. I drive the kids around a lot. The mornings, the traffic, so I'm very, very familiar with it. Coming and going to the Kennedy, the Harold Wyman, things like that. So traffic and a lot of the things you guys have brought up is really good stuff. Concern coming down Clinton Street. It's already tough enough that it gets backed up pretty bad. Thinking about the more density and cars coming to that place coming from down Clinton Street to get home. It's only one lane to go right or left, so you're at the mercy of that light cycle to get there. And if the light at Main Street near Jack's gets backed up, then Clinton Street gets backed up. And we had a tardy kid today because we couldn't get over to pick someone up at near the Harold Wyman and get back to the Kennedy in time, just because too many people trying to take lefts just bogs everything down and it gets backed up pretty quick. Eventually it does clear, but it can be a little frustrating in the morning when you're trying to get to work and stuff like that. So that Clinton Street intersection is something of a concern. And I do want to say I'm not against the project. I think it could definitely make the neighborhood look nice. I've been doing a lot of work at my house. I think you're familiar with my property. Not once have I been contacted or asked about anything. I'm there for the long run. Like I said, I've invested a lot of money to make, I'm probably the main property that has made Central Square look a lot nicer. And I take some pride into that. And the area has been run down for quite a while with vacant houses that I've learned have been owned by them. So now they kind of want the credit to make it all look better. But it would have been nice if it's been looking a little better for a while now. They talk about putting some more striped lines for parking in front of Jack's. If anyone knows that area, if there's cars parked there for longer than they should or even parked there, that reduces the cars that can get by to the right, and they're stuck waiting for the cars to take a left. So more parking there certainly wouldn't relieve any pressure from that intersection. I wonder about Wilcox Circle when you're coming down Lowell Street. They talk about getting rid of that roadway that cuts across. Is that Lowell Street? That extension of Lowell Street, getting rid of that. And I wonder how many cars can get up to that set of lights at Main Street before it backs up and doesn't allow the cars to get there to take a right. So 5 cars, 6 cars. So there's not a lot of distance from that light to back to the canal where you can really allow for a lot of flow of traffic to right lane, left lane, things like that. So that does concern me a little bit. I think we're in the early stages, so if not all these houses are owned, cutting off that Lowell Street is probably something that needs to be discussed a lot more. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out. I feel like the green space does look a little nice, but I also feel like it's mainly for the new units and not so much for the neighborhood. But again, I'm not completely against it. I just do know coming from that direction, that's kind of a nice way to get away from that intersection. And that's about it. I guess the only other thing is they talk about the traffic is kind of a little a little off around the Clinton Street with the opposite intersections, but correct me if I'm wrong, one of those intersections was put in for just Tachi, and that had made that area a lot harder to manage, especially the cars coming out of Tachi and taking a right on Red and into that area where you're not actually supposed to be. So, you know, I think you guys are on track. You're asking a lot of good questions, so I'm glad to hear that. Improvements to Central Square and the neighborhood and our property values is certainly something I'm open to. So I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you. If you could sign the paper there, please. Thank you, Mr. Swoop. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Robert Dean, 20 Wyman Street, and I'm all in favor for the project, but the only thing I don't like is eliminating that road that this gentleman just talked about. That's my biggest problem. Most nights, I can't even get out of my driveway, especially like summertime when 128 is backed up and they send us right down, they send all the traffic down Wyman Street. In the mornings, at the light, it's brutal. I know you're gonna move that road over. I don't know why you'd want to make that Wyman Green wide. I mean, that road used to be a two-way road. You could drive down to Wyman and then you could come back. And that, I don't think that should be eliminated. I don't know how you can eliminate a city road anyway, you know? That's my only concern about this whole project, you know? I mean, those houses are a mess. They need to come down. This man does a great job. I walked through his property when I was a kid. I used to play on the field there. I know that property better than the back of my right hand, you know? And that road should not be eliminated. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. I don't know, we ready to close the public hearing? Think we should close the public hearing?
Nobody wants to speak, but, Mr. Chairman, if I can suggest, as Jim pointed out earlier, you know, this is about the zoning ordinance and the map itself. So for tonight's meeting, in preparation, I produced a staff report and a subsequent director's recommendation if we get that far this evening. But it really is about dealing with the zoning ordinance at this point in time, and the project would come subsequently, so.
We actually talked about that when you left.
Oh, okay, good, yeah. So that's what I was doing.
I didn't know if you were coming back.
Redrafting this.
Make sure that we talked about it. Okay, so, this is a public hearing. I don't know if the will of the board is to close the public hearing at this point. If so, I would need a motion on that. If there is no motion on that, then the public hearing is still open.
So would we be closing the public hearing because we're gonna vote tonight?
Not in my mind. In my mind, we would be closing the public hearing because between this one and the last one, we had like 4 people speak. So I'm guessing anybody that's want to say anything, we've had it for 2 meetings, has said something.
Right, but if we had another meeting, say this carries on to the next meeting.
Yes.
They could introduce new information.
They could.
And the public, if we close the public,
That's why I'm asking.
all right, so that's why I'm saying maybe we should just leave it open.
Well, I haven't had a motion to close it, so,
Yeah,
and it's no motion to close it, it stays open.
okay.
But we can discuss things.
Right.
So, as I'd said earlier, that we really are just here to vote or talk about the changing of, creating this zoning ordinance. And if anybody's had a chance to read the director's recommendation, which is very good, and his points, if they have any questions of him, at the moment, or if, John, if you'd like to discuss it for a moment, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you want me to go through it,
right
I'll go
ahead,
through it real
please.
quick. So the first question I want to ask the board, and I brought up in the staff report, is everybody in agreement with the proposed boundaries and the properties that are included in the petition? So that would be the first order of business. If anybody had any amendments they'd like to put forward regarding the actual boundaries, or are you satisfied with the boundaries as presented?
Good question. Jim?
Unclear what the boundaries are.
Well, they're
I'd
pretty
like to see,
clear.
you
I
know,
mean, applicant, can you show the boundaries on the overhead projection? They are included in the color rendition they
Yes.
submitted this evening. There should be a map in there.
Are those two pieces of Lyman Ave, or Eaton Ave included?
Nope.
I mean, this is the first order of business that we really have to tend to. You know, do we agree with the boundaries itself?
On that packet.
So, good, Mr. Chairman. I
Please,
guess
John.
Pointer, no one has a pointer, I'll just point things out. So, starting at that would be the west boundary of the property that begins at the border of, what's known locally as the canal, bordering the canal. So you're going along the southerly border in an easterly direction, and right there, that's the southern border of the fire station property. So this is the fire station here, and then running northerly along the southbound side of Main Street, from this point here, all the way up to Lowell Road, and
Sorry.
Roll there, John.
look at that. One more.
You want to follow him as he traces.
Yeah, here we go. Don't move.
We're just gonna leave it here.
Stay still. Okay, so the boundary would go all the way to the far side of the canal route. Well, I should say, this is the walking path, former railroad right-of-way. But the boundary, this is the easterly boundary of the canal, right here. So this is the boundary. These are the boundaries, all the properties included, owned mostly by Mr. Tachi, but as we know this evening, two private property owners are not yet in agreement with the overlay district. But again, they're not proposing to take anyone's rights away within the boundaries of this overlay district. So the primary district remains in place.
West boundary that separates the Takchi tract of land and the proposed bike path at the old railroad bed alongside the canal is currently, if I understood you correctly, in this overlay. So now you get two overlays overlapping.
Yeah, Mr. Tachi, you want to respond to that? or-
Stand up in here at the podium.
Yeah. Here we go.
Let me try to clarify something. So,
It's a simple question.
yeah,
Mr.
sure,
Pavone.
yeah.
The two overlays are overlapping. That's what you're proposing right now. Currently, there's an bike overlay district that goes from Woburn Center that they're proposing all the way up to School Street. Takes the old canal bed where the trains ran. Right now, you're going up to the easterly edge of the canal, according to Mr. Cashel. That would give us about a 20-foot overlap for the two overlay districts. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, but there would be nothing to prohibit such as, overlay. You can overlay upon overlay upon
Understood.
overlay.
Well, what's gained? Why can't they just abut?
I think the overlay for our property should just end at the edge of our property.
Yeah,
And wherever the bike path starts should be where the other overlay picks up. And if they do happen to overlap, which they shouldn't, unless the city's overlay, I'll call it the city's overlay, the bike path overlay, encroaches onto the Tachi property, which is not a problem for us.
I think that's a very good answer to your first question.
And I think just on the issue of some of the other ones that are not included, like Eaton Ave per se, I'd just like to note this. I mean, having been in this area myself for 50 years, we all know that we all park in front of Jack's. We all know we park on the other side of Jack's. We've all been doing it for the better part of our lives. Some of it's striped, some of it isn't. A lot of these improvements, and like Lowell Street, the cut through, that actually came out of the neighborhood meeting that we had that was about 80 people, I think, that attended. I apologize that you didn't get notice or weren't there. We're happy to discuss it. We're agnostic to it. If everybody says, leave Lowell Street, it's fine with us. It actually saves us a bunch of money not to do it. So these issues will come up later on when we get into the actual planning for the project. What we're trying to show is some area-wide things that we think today are really needed for the area. We all drive this area, as Mr. Callahan said. We all know that there's some tough traffic situations now. We've all come from the cinema and tried to take a left at Eaton Ave. And some people will let you take a left and other people squeeze to the right and you can't take a left. So some of these things, I'll analogize it with this. There was a certain project on the west side recently that was approved a couple of years ago that sued the city because we wanted them to put, I believe, in my opinion, put my resident hat on, a sidewalk. And I think they said they sued the city saying you can't impose that on us because it's not a condition of the property. And they won. We're actually proposing to do things that we aren't even required to do as mitigation. We're proposing on our own accord to propose mitigation to help this project that, in my opinion, goes far beyond what this project will create to help the area. Now, they're just proposals by us to help off-site. They're not within the overlay, but they are things that we're proposing to do primarily on city land to help improve traffic and pedestrian walkways. But they're all going to be open to debate. But we're trying to come forth as a proactive developer with ideas which will allow, which will require both us to spend money and likely get some grants to help cover those costs. But all these things are on the table. We're not trying to come in and say, we're going to create a park just for the benefit of the residents that may be at our property. If the city doesn't perceive that as an amenity for the whole area, then let's keep Lowell Street the way it is. And if we don't think it's the right thing to do, if putting the right-hand turn lane, which in my opinion is needed today, if we don't think it's a good idea, then we won't get there. So it's all open for discussion, and I welcome all the inputs from the neighbors.
Just on the road stuff, for anything that you're gonna do on Route 38, aren't you gonna have to get state approval to do that?
State approval actually ends, Scott can correct me, I think it actually is not in front of our property, the state road, I don't believe. That doesn't mean that they may not have some input here or there, but Scott, the state line is not in front, correct? Yeah, it's not state jurisdiction. So city would, but the city, and its residents and.
Well, no, the state tends to be a little harder to.
I agree. Yeah.
We tried to get the whole rotary
Right.
done. He said
Right.
no. Yes, John.
Yeah. This is not an advocacy of the project, but just through 40 years of experience of dealing with planning.
Yeah.
Multiple communities, reading over numerous case studies on projects.
Yeah.
There's never been a project, to my knowledge, that has ever been denied because of traffic. Maybe safety issues, yes, but not volumes of traffic. So that upsets a lot of people, but it's really a fact. You know? But when we get to traffic, the traffic will definitely be part of the special permit review for whatever project you end up bringing forward. One point I want to bring out, as Mr. Curran brought up at the initial public hearing, what we have to be cognizant of is the text of the ordinance itself, and trying the best we can to analyze the text so that we end up with the project that we envision by this proposal, and not something else, and not something overly dense than what we can determine text-wise. So when we really get into the the wording of the ordinance itself, when we get to that part of the deliberations that we're dealing with, that's what we really want to try to focus in on. And again, we're only making a recommendation to the city council. The city council ultimately has the authority to amend the language. We're just recommending to the council. We have no authority to adopt anything that's proposed. Again, we're an advisory board to the city council. They have all the authority, and then ultimately, the mayor has veto power with his pen if he so chooses to exercise that. So we're just strictly an advisory board in this matter to the city council. All that being said, that's the truth about traffic. And when this project does come forward, with all the plans associated with it, and, we're dealing with a density issue, you're going to have to prove your road improvements are not going to further exacerbate the traffic congestion. There's a section of the zoning ordinance that addresses that. That's, and I'm sure, as it always does, it will be handled properly by the traffic engineers. And when the peer review is conducted, which I'm sure will happen, the funny thing about traffic engineering and peer reviews of traffic engineering, they all derive their information from the same traffic manual. So it's pretty scientific, and they overdo it all the time with the numbers to be generated by projects. They always overshoot, and anybody that's associated with this business knows that. They have an astronomical number of projected vehicle trips associated with projects that never meet the numbers that are presented so they always overshoot. So,
I think just one
Let me
comment to
ask
it.
you, John, then why is traffic so bad in Woburn?
well, I will love to answer that question. I'll do it right now. Woburn has a lot of traffic that's associated with the economic development engine of the state of Massachusetts. So a lot of traffic that exists in Woburn is going north, south, east, and west from its point of origin. So everybody travels from point A to point B. Usually point A is home to point B is work, and vice versa. So Woburn is very fortunate as a community. And again, I've lived here all my life. I was a planning director for 17 years before leaving and coming back now. Worked in many communities. And Woburn, I say, is a fortunate community, and there are quite a few fortunate communities, because we're a community that has a very sizable business sector. Some people would describe it as very large for a community our size. Some projections are that 200,000 people are employed within the boundaries of the city of Woburn. And we only have, I think it's 17,000 households. It might be a little bit less, might be a little bit more. Don't know the accurate number. But what I'm getting at, Woburn has traffic, but we also benefit because we have such a large commercial base that our residential taxes, in many instances, are half of what other communities are, especially communities this close to Boston. So a lot of those communities that I'm talking about, without naming, and everybody does know this because, it's always a mayoral issue, a political issue in town. The issue is that we have such a good, strong commercial base, it takes almost half the tax burden off of the residents of this city, so that your property tax for the house you live in is less than half of what it is in the abutting communities. And why is that? Well, those abutting communities are not as fortunate to have such a strong commercial base as Woburn has. And if we didn't have such a strong commercial base, guess what? Our taxes would be double what we're paying now. And that's a fact. So
But John,
you get traffic, but you get the benefit of the traffic, where other communities, they don't get the benefit of the traffic they have, and they have just as much traffic as we have.
Right, but I understand the financial
Simple.
side of it. My question is, when they're looking at traffic, are they looking at the whole picture of traffic? Because I'm gonna tell you, I live down near the courthouse, and I don't know what they were doing when they made up that traffic plan, but it is a disaster. And the traffic people are mathematicians. Traffic to them is a math game, but we all know traffic is psychology. So I don't know how you do it, but there has to be another way, better way, more complete way. If you're saying tens of thousands of people come into Woburn every day, is that all factored in? And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if it's all factored in, how do we end up with so many traffic messes?
Because there's accidents on 128.
No, I don't
Three.
mean that. I'm talking about messes, that there are times when I live in North Woburn, I'm trying to come here for the planning board meeting, and Jim and I had this conversation, where I'm just sitting in traffic, and there's no accident. There's no thing going on at the high school, there's no whatever it is, and that is part of what needs to be factored in when we're looking at projects like this.
Yeah, traffic is the bane of all our existence. I wish I would leave my driveway in the morning and nobody else was on the road. You know, wouldn't that be a perfect world? The fact of the matter is, we all love to be in our vehicles. It's a very hard thing for traffic engineers and planners to implement improvements so that not so many cars are on the road. When we live in a country that loves our single occupancy vehicle to get into, to go places. And, you know, unless that changes, I would say best bet is to time wherever you're going. And, you know, if you have a remote work experience, so much the better.
So I would, great conversation.
Yeah.
but
Oh, yeah.
We have other stuff to do.
Absolutely.
But Woburn is also the cut-through for 93 and 128.
Get all that.
So we're all in the middle.
But
And
it
the
has
other
to all
thing.
be built into the plan.
But whenever we get, I always laugh when we get a traffic study. There's gonna be more traffic. Like, I don't need a study to tell me there's gonna be more traffic, you know, like when we built the Woburn Village over there and all that stuff there, there was already a ton of traffic over there, and then we have a traffic study done telling us there's gonna be more traffic. Great, thank you. This particular project here, there's a lot of traffic in that section of Main Street now. Sometimes getting off of 128, you're backed all the way to, you're almost getting off the exit of 128. When these go up, there's gonna be more traffic. There's gonna be more traffic. If there's traffic at Jack's Lights now, when these go up, there'll be more traffic going into Jack's Lights. There's no, you know, we almost don't even need a traffic study.
Right.
There's gonna be more traffic, that's it.
Yeah, and eventually there will be a straw of a project that breaks the camel's back.
Sometimes coming out of Valley Road, I gotta wait, it seems like 10 minutes to get out of Valley Road onto Pleasant Street. It's probably 30 seconds, but it seems like 10 minutes, but that's just traffic. There's no, the roads weren't built for the amount of cars that we have on the road today. No roads were built for it, and it's just gonna keep getting worse.
128 used to be a two-lane road, undivided.
So I'd like to get back to where we were, and I thought we were going in a good direction about 20 minutes ago. And that was, John, you were leading us on
Yeah.
this, what you did, and starting out with the geography of it and everything. We had a question, and I think we got through that. And so,
Yeah.
lead us on.
Yeah, okay, so the meat of the ordinance itself, I produced this evening, proposed recommendation. The board doesn't have to go through this all in one night. If you want to, and you have the time for it, we will do that. So what I did in this director's recommendation for this evening, the entirety of the zoning ordinance is presented with edits in blueprint, and the edits primarily consist of the proper numbering of the section, the new section of Central Square Overlay District. As you'll recall, it was originally submitted as Section 34, but that was abruptly adopted as the MBTA ordinance. So Section 34 was taken, and this new section, the actual numbering of it is new Section 35. So all of the edits that you see in blue reflect primarily the proper numbering of the proposed section 35 in all its subsections. There are a couple of caveats to the blue. If you look at section 35.5, number 1, uses allowed by right within the site plan review. There are a number of solar uses that are stricken from the original text.
Yes.
And I think that makes all the sense. If the board has any questions about that, those are now properly numbered, and the applicant has requested, A through F, proposed A through F, again, roof-mounted solar panels be stricken from the ordinance text. Okay? But just to go back to the beginning, there's no changes other than the numeral edits for page number 1. And then on page number 2, I have the correct director's recommendation here, but what I want to read to you, if you go down to the last paragraph, it begins section 11.11, affordable housing requirements. What I'd like to do is recommend to this board, in this recommendation, that that particular line be amended with the following language, in parentheses, note, in accordance with section 11.11, 15% of the total number of housing units shall be designated as affordable. So you don't see that in your copies. I said it was there, but it wasn't, and I do have clean copies that indicate that language. But that would be recommended amendment language pertaining to that particular section, 35.4. I thought that was important to clarify that, so there's no question about it. That's a big issue. Everybody's concerned about producing adequate affordable housing, and section 1111 does call for a minimum of 15%. And as everybody knows, that's 5% more than the minimum provided by 40B. And we do have to maintain at least 10% of our housing stock as affordable. The other changes on page 3, and this isn't very long, it's only 6 pages. The other section that does propose a change from the original submission is section 35.52, line 10. The applicant, in blue lettering, has requested the elimination of 10, which reads business, professional, and general office. So they want to strike that use from the uses allowed within the ordinance by special permit with site plan review. Again, I want to emphasize, as written, this ordinance would call for the city council to be the special permit granting authority as well as a site plan review authority, depending on the use. And then all the other changes on that page 3 are numeric. Okay, and then we go on to change page 4. At the top, general provisions, number 1, and that has 4 subsections. And in yellow highlighted with red print face, I've made a number of suggestions, and I'll read them real quick. So parking facilities contained within a building shall not be included in the calculation of a building's height. Now, when I read that, I said, that's something of concern, and we really want to get this thing right. So I put in, again, in yellow with red print, as a recommendation to the city council. The city council may want to take a focused look at this provision. And I put a question mark after that. That's just highlighting to the council, this is what's being proposed by me at this point to the board, asking them, they may want to take a special look at the language of this section. And that would be up to the council to, take formal action on whether they want to amend that language or not. And we're recommending by flagging it in this yellow and red print. The second section of the 4, except with respect to maximum height, the specific dimensional requirements of section 35.6.2 below shall apply only to the district as a whole and not to individual lots. Well, that language confused me, and I get confused pretty easily because I like keeping things simple. You know that saying, KISS. So I'm flagging that with the comment that I'm suggesting again to this board to recommend to the council. The city council may want this provision clarified. So you may want to consider rewording that so that we're all on the same page as far as understanding what it means. And then one other change within those 4 sections. The minimum street frontage requirements set forth below may be satisfied by the aggregate frontage of any contiguous or non-contiguous parcels within the district. My comment in regard to that passage is the city council may also want this provision further clarified. So for the council to figure out, unless the board wants to ask the applicant what he means by that, I'm suggesting that, we could send this to the council, with that comment of concern. And then, moving down, I didn't have any noted changes with specific requirements, lot area, frontage, and yards. But at the end, I provide the note, in the similar district of S2, which allows elevator apartments and other multifamily uses, the maximum building ground coverage, BGC is building ground coverage, is 30%, and the minimum landscape usable open space, LSUOS, is 40%. So what the applicant is providing for in their ordinance is a maximum building coverage of 40%, where the similar zoning district in place right now in the city, the most similar to what they're proposing is S2. And the S2 provides for a maximum of 30% building ground coverage. So again, I'm flagging that particular concern in these table of dimensional uses, or I should say dimensional criteria for that. And also, the minimum landscape usable open space for that S2 district is 40%. They're proposing 25%. That's a pretty, I would describe it planning-wise, that's a severe reduction in the landscape usable open space, and it's not typical. And the applicant could ask any questions of me in regard to that, but I'm just flagging that. That's a minor amount of landscape usable open space for any project. And you can compare all the zoning districts in the city of Woburn in the table of dimensional regulations, and I didn't see 25%. Somebody's eyes might be better, but I didn't see anything that low. And the applicant, may very well need that and can argue effectively that, but I think the place to argue that is with the actual adopting authority, in that we should be just focused in on flagging our concerns with the text of the ordinance. Moving on, I didn't see anything change or recommend any changes to the board regarding 4 until you get into page 5. So 4 reads in its entirety, again, real quickly, building height and intensity of use, the maximum height for the Central Square overlay district developments shall be 5 stories in 65 feet. Maximum height along Main Street to be no more than 3 stories in 39 feet. So my comment of concern that I'm recommending, the city council may want to compare these proposed height and intensity of use provisions with the existing underlying zoning district, which is primarily S1, with several of the properties along Main Street near Lowell Street zoned R2. So along Main Street, maximum height allowance, and this was brought out at the previous public hearing, maximum height allowance is 35. The design of their buildings calls for a 39 foot. And again, they could debate that particular point with the council. And as far as the maximum height of 65 feet, 5 stories, there's another provision in here whereby structured parking within these buildings, the 65 feet would not apply. So the building would be higher than 65 feet because the structured parking within the building would not be included in the height. So you could effectively have a maximum of 65 feet plus 20 feet, which would bring you up to 85 feet. So, you know, again, we're flagging this for the council to consider in what they may very well want to change, taking into consideration the low elevation of buildings in that whole area. Okay, number 5, the maximum number of residential units shall not be more than 225 units. And my note of concern here is that, note, any changes the city council may make to the proposed applicant drafted dimensional and intensity of use schedules will affect the number of units included in this section. If the city council does in fact make reductions in said schedules, the applicant should be requested for a subsequent meeting, a future meeting, to produce a maximum number of units per such changes. And what I'm saying there is, you know, if they change the amount of landscape usable open space from 25 to 35, or the building ground coverage max from 40 to 30, that's going to reduce the number of units that would be developable on this particular lot. You take from one, you give to the other, vice versa. So that number of 225 maximum units would have to be changed if they made changes, they being the council actually made changes to the ordinance language, reducing the density of the development. Okay, and then there's no further changes in that section. Then you have off-street parking requirements. And the concern here is that parking for all non-residential uses, 2 spaces for every 1,000 square feet of net floor area. And they're proposing 1.5 spaces for every residential unit. So my note of concern here is that in regard to required parking spaces to consider for this overlay district, please refer to existing Woburn zoning ordinance section 825, schedule of minimum numbers of required off-street parking stalls. For example, retail space calls for 1 parking space per 200 square feet. And per 200 square feet, first floor retail, and office space 1 per 350 net square feet. And this applicant's calling for parking of all non-residential uses, 2 spaces for every 1,000 square feet, which is, you know, statistically speaking, a couple of deviations from the standard. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I like statistics, and they say a lot about statistics. And then there are no other changes other than numerical edits on page 6. So those are my recommendations to the board if we were to go so far as to want to go in that direction this evening.
Do you have any questions of the director at this point on what he has submitted? Which I think he did a wonderful job on. Buddy from that side. Okay. David?
So what do we do with it?
Well, we can discuss it.
Can I
and
answer
see-
that one? May I, Mr. Chairman? Just to add, David, that's a great question. You know, we could wrestle with this for meeting upon meeting, you know, or we can come to terms. And the real terms is that, you know, we've heard from the applicant, we have a pretty good idea of what the project's going to be proposed, what the project's going to consist of in the future. We're being asked with this petition to recommend to the council. Again, they have the authority to adopt the ultimate text of the zoning ordinance. And that would be up to them. I read through this, and I read through it, and I read through it, and, you know, these are the real flags that stick out with the proposal. And, you know, as Mr. Curran pointed out to us, it's really important to get the zoning ordinance right. And I think, you know, in my own opinion, giving the years of experience I have with this stuff to the board this evening, those are the major points, and board members more than welcome to add, subtract, whatever from that, but that's my recommendation to the board. And if you wanted to, you could move this along and send the recommendation to the council. They do have a public hearing on this. I know they're waiting to hear from us. If it's just an interim recommendation, so be it. If it's a final recommendation, you know, I feel comfortable in what I've presented this evening. So, but I'm open for any amendments.
Jim?
I'd like to make a motion to continue this application to the next planning board meeting. To review the items that John brought forward, also to discuss internally amongst ourselves about certain components of the job that are proposed and how they affect and interact with the possible mitigation / work being considered by the city and other tracts of land in the immediate area.
Okay, the motion by Jim to continue the public hearing on this particular matter till our next meeting. I have a second on the motion.
I'll second it to force on a vote.
Seconded by Dave. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of continuing the public hearing to our next meeting? 3, 4, 5. All against? 2. 5 to 2. So the motion is to continue the public hearing till our next meeting. So between then and now, I would hopefully don't have to instruct anybody, but please go through this, go through John's recommendations, go through anything else that's on here. If you have any changes to be made, please suggest them, even if you get to the planning board director before the next meeting so that he can put them in there or something, please do, so that we can hopefully make sure this is taken care of this next time around. Okay? That's it. Thank you. Okay, let's see, what's next? Up next is, I guess, a little discussion on the procedural rules governing the planning board and what changes Claudia and I had made. We submitted that to the planning office, put in writing. Oh, you haven't seen it? Okay. John did it himself. To put it in black and white so that everybody could see it. Has that been done yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Karen, do we have that for tonight?
I've never seen it.
Oh, you never saw it? Oh, okay.
Oh.
Continue that till the
We'll
next meeting?
continue that till the next
Okay.
meeting then.
That'll be of primary importance to add on to that one. All right.
Okay.
You know, you know, for this meeing, this really
You're
had
good.
to.
You're good.
I had to put
You
time
did a
into
lot
it.
of work on this whole thing.
Yeah.
You're good. All right, planning department updates. The board's about the next meeting is March 11th. Okay. And then it was about the Boston Regional Metropolitan Planning Organization, which John has attached, something for us to take a look at.
Yeah.
People interested.
Yeah. There's a couple of quick comments. We do have a mini master plan operation going on. City has hired a consultant to conduct a study of the off Woburn area from Merrimack Street, New Boston Street, in that particular general area, relative to assessing the existing zoning, existing infrastructure, and the mass transportation components that are involved up in that area, and what the city is trying to do to accommodate that in the future growth of that area. So that's a master plan that's being worked on now. We do have a parking management plan that's being worked on by a consultant the city was able to hire through a state grant. Probably in several months from now, we'll be, ready to present the findings of this study. And it's downtown. It's, to identify accurately all of the public parking areas, their capacity, the parking along the streets, and what possible amendments to the parking downtown we can implement to make the event of you wanting a parking space more easily to come by. So that's a goal, because a lot of people complain that, they'd love to go downtown and, enjoy the eateries, but there's no place to park. Well, there's a lot of parking, but, you do have to walk. You're not gonna find, a front row parking space unless you're really lucky. But, there are a lot of spaces out there, and part of this parking management plan is to do a better job with implementing wayfinding signs, not creating sign pollution for the sake of just adding more signs, but, make more informative and strategically placed signs so that people can more easily identify public places to park. So that has been the focus of this consulting group for several months now, and they'll be ready to present that publicly, probably in another several months. We got a lot of figuring out relative to what we can and cannot do with our public parking facilities. Other than that, any board members have questions? I mean, it's not like, of yesteryear, you were able to open up the Times and get all the news fit to print, right? At the New York Times.
You'd have to get the Times.
Yeah, but, so many people don't get the local paper, and, if you want to get any information about what's going on locally, you got to turn to Facebook pretty much. And a lot of people just don't do that either, because a lot of the elements of Facebook aren't, particularly user-friendly or whatever. Somebody has.
Yes, Dave.
John, on the parking issue, has the city at all thought about changing some of the rules for development that says they don't have to supply parking if they're within so many feet of a municipal parking lot? Because I think one of the issues might be that we've put up so much construction around the Woburn Center area over the years, and they've all said, well, we don't have to put any parking in because we're within, I don't know, 300 feet of the municipal parking lot. But haven't we reached the point where it's all used up?
Great question, Dave. Two projects over this past year, multifamily mixed use in downtown, one directly abutting Walnut Street parking lot. The city council did a great job. I drafted a recommendation to them, but they did a great job of working with that developer, and they came up with the compromise, reduction in number of units. They provided a certain number of on-site parking. They had the area for parking, but there's a provision in the zoning ordinance that's really important, and it provides that $4,500 per parking space not provided by an applicant in the downtown area goes into a parking fund. And right now, the city has $117,000 in that fund that it has collected over the years. And we're actually going to put that to good use. I don't know if you're familiar with the improvements that have been made to Magazine Hill, but it's no longer a site of refuse and debris. It's been cleaned up. There's a beautiful aggregate, compacted aggregate surface to it. It has a French drain along the base of the cliff, along the entire base, and all the water shedding, rainwater shedding in that area is graded towards the cliff and going into the ground. So it's not a matter of, there's a surface up there that's causing flooding or spewing rainwater in directions it shouldn't be going. It's all been designed that way, so it goes into the French drain. That was all done through a state grant last year that we had to spend by June 30th. And all that work that was done up there, including lights that are installed, at the cost of a little over $30,000. And it wasn't it wasn't local taxpayer dollars, it was grant funding from the state that provided that work. Now, our goal is to finish that project and pave it, but we want to be cautious with that, the city does, in making sure that the drainage, as designed, is going to be able to handle the storm events so that no flooding conditions result. So we're watching this spring, hopefully we get some significant rains that will add to what we already know, that we learned in the fall about the drainage capacity of that site. But once we're convinced that there wouldn't be a flooding problem up there with pavement added, hard surface pavement, everything flowing the way it's supposed to and going into the ground the way it was designed, once that's determined, we're going to move forward with fixing or completing that job. And that'll provide 52 parking spaces. And we have enough parking money that was collected to actually do that job, and in all likelihood, create a sidewalk on the south side of Mans Court and improve the 10 parking spaces that exist along Mans Court on city-owned property. Right now, it's just willy-nilly parking, and it's very aesthetically unpleasing to look at. But we're gonna clean all that up along Mans Court, the southern side of Mans Court, including pretty much all the overgrowth along that side of Mans Court. It's unsightly now. We're cleaning things up, and it's an important project that the mayor wants to, complete. We made a big stride forward in that deplorable site last year, and now we want to finish that job. And again, create 52 parking spaces. Now, the state, when they typically go to create a parking space, you know how much it costs to create a parking space? $30,000. We're going to create 52 parking spaces, okay, for probably a total cost of less than $150,000. So do the math. We can do the job a lot cheaper. Yeah, so we're getting 52. If the state was doing the job, I think you have 5 or 6, if my math's correct. But anyway, that's going to be a significant addition, an important addition to parking downtown for insignificant dollars. And the state dropped that project over 20 years ago. You know why? It was going to cost too much. I push this thought every town I work in. Stop thinking Big Brother's coming to the rescue. Do the job yourself. As a community, you'll spend a lot less money and you'll get the job done a lot sooner. Localities can do a lot for themselves instead of waiting and waiting and waiting for Big Brother. And I'll give you a big example. When I was a town planner in Hudson, I injected that thought into them. They have one of the nicest local parks that's ever been created. And it's on the Benson Wild Animal farm property that the town of Hudson acquired. And everybody got together one Saturday morning with their rakes and shovels and lawnmowers, and the job began. 30 years later, $1 million of local money. They have a senior center on the property, 20 miles of walking, beautiful walking area, wetlands, people do weddings, they have concerts there, and a lot of the Benson Wild Animal Farms, which I'm sure everybody visited as a kid, a lot of them have been restored. The lion's cage, the gorilla cage, all of those buildings are now restored.
Nothing in them,
No, there's nothing, but there's, it's such a great history with that.
no. Benson's is great.
Yeah.
Pleasure Island.
Yeah. You always
Live at
knew,
Pleasure Island, eh?
you always knew you were close when you saw the bridge, the spanning Merrimack River in Tingsboro.
What are they, just quickly, what are they doing at the Hurl School? Is that gonna be open space? What's gonna be a park?
Yeah, that is planned.
Okay.
Well planned for a park, passive recreational, nature park, at a substantial cost. So the city is vigorously trying to track down.
It's all taken down. And in the center of town, the dome there,
Yeah,
it used to be the gas station. What, is something going in there?
yeah, that was approved. That was another one that the city council did a really good job of helping to redesign it with materials that much more conducive to a New England downtown. It had a western design to it. I would describe it as western. It really didn't fit in. But the council worked with them, and they're gonna have a brick facade. They pulled the building back so that traffic coming out of Salem Street onto Main won't have a blind line of sight.
What's it gonna be, though? Just an office building?
It'll be 6 units of housing, parking on site, and a small storefront in the base, on the ground level. But hats off to them, they did a really good job. And the council does a really good job. I'm not just saying that because
Is there parking on site?
I want them to be nice to me. They'll never do that, but
It's on television. I mean.
I get what I deserve.
This is recorded, John. Don't
Yeah,
tell them
no,
that's
it's
why
fine.
you're saying they do a good job. I mean, jeez. All right, we have some draft minutes from January 14th, 2025.
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Claudia is going to make a motion, or has made a motion, to approve the January 14th, 2025 draft minutes as is.
Second?
Second by Carolyn. All those in favor? 7-0 passes. And I think that's it.
That's it.
Okay.
All right, well, if
Claudia?
there's no other business, then I would make a motion to adjourn at 8:52.
Motion by Claudia to adjourn at 8:52.
Second.
Second by Rob? Excellent. I don't hear you over there a lot, so all those in favor? 7-0 carries. Thank you. Very good. 8-0 carries.
All right.